my other practical piece would be to like learn how to sit with other people in their aches and not try to solve it, but to just be in it and to just allow Christ to unite us and not our states in life.
Welcome to This Whole Life, a podcast for all of us seeking sanity and sanctity, and a place to find joy and meaning through the integration of faith and mental health. I'm Kenna Millay, a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I'm happy to bring you this podcast along with my husband, Pat Millay, a Catholic speaker, musician, and leader. We invite you to our kitchen table. Okay, not literally, but you're definitely invited into the conversations that we seem to keep having once the kids have scattered off to play and we're left doing the dishes. We're excited to share this podcast for educational purposes. It's not intended as therapy or as a substitute for mental health care. So let's get talking about this whole life. When my friends down and out, I'm not gonna run when it's hard to figure it all out. Welcome back to This Whole Life podcast. It is awesome to be with all of you today and to have our very first ever interview guest, Ashley Cermak. Welcome, Ashley.
Hello.
Thanks
you
so much for coming up here to our third floor, the podcast lair.
It's beautiful.
Isn't it so glamorous up here?
You guys, I'm telling you, it's amazing.
So Ashley, it's awesome to have you. You know, you have been connected to Pat through ministry for a long time, but you and I have been able to develop a connection over this past year as you have stepped into the world of therapy and counseling. So it's just awesome to have you. I'm looking forward to having you in the field as you look toward graduation in the spring. How's it all going? How are you feeling about it?
About graduation,
Yeah.
I am ready.
Yes.
Yes. I mean, on the one hand, right? Like, oh my goodness, I'm going to be like a real therapist. That's a little scary. But on the other hand, I am ready to be done with school.
Yeah. You were made for this kind of ministry and this kind of service. Yeah. So yeah, we will be so grateful to have you. Before we get too much into this, because I know we want to hear a bit more about your background and into this topic of the single life as a Catholic woman, and also connecting to the universal ache that you're going to explain to us. But first, as we always do, you may know, Ashley, we start with our high and our hard.
Yes.
So as our guest, as my guest, would you mind going first?
Sure. So this week, I would say that my high was, okay, background. I'm a huge Josh Garrels fan. If you don't know who Josh Garrels is, you all should look him up.
All right, Paul Cifuentes, shout out to you. He loves Josh Garrels. Okay, keep going.
Love it. So I am like such a fangirl that I kind of obsessively check to see if he has any new music dropping. And he just had a single, I think it was a cover of somebody else, but that's okay, called This Wild Earth.
Okay.
And I just love the words. And I just got really happy hearing Josh Garrels' high voice. He pulls it off.
That's awesome.
And the instruments are great. So
we should link that up in our show notes. So
absolutely.
Yeah, our listeners, and including me, can go check that out.
Yes.
Okay, so that's your high. And your hard lately.
Yeah. I think my hard lately has just been, we'll probably get into this in a minute, but as I am in my internship and seeing my own clients, just really feeling the beautiful but heavy weight of people's stories, and just really entering into what one of my professors calls the not yet, right? Of like, we're with people in the midst of their brokenness, in the midst of their ache, and what a privilege. But also it's hard. It's hard to like maintain hope and not catch all the different things going on and just, really keep my eyes focused on Christ amidst it all.
Yeah. Yeah. Like letting yourself be that instrument for his healing work. It's tough when they're humanly like right in front of you hurting. And absolutely. I can. Yeah.
You get it more than I do.
That is relevant. That is relevant to my life as well. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. I'll start with my hard. it is influenza season. And I think the hard for me, my spiritual director was identifying this for me. He's like, man, you really struggle when there is not structure, like anything that deviates from the plan, capital T, capital P. And it is, I mean, the illnesses themselves are hard. Watching our children suffer physically is hard and all of that. But for me, it is how kind of quickly I feel like I unravel when I don't have my structure and my routines and I can't rely on things, which, it sounds kind of ridiculous as a mother of 7 that I would ever think that I could rely on a schedule. But I do. I come to really appreciate the rhythm of our life. Yeah. And so that has definitely been that flexibility that's been demanded of me lately. And then I would say my high has been, for sure, this podcast gaining steam and energy and getting feedback from folks and reading the reviews. I don't like to check them very often because I don't know. I have a lot of thoughts about how that could be a negative in my life, be it pride or just self-critical or what have you. But anyway, so every now and then I do look, and it is so affirming. The feedback has been really positive, and Pat has always been such a big advocate for folks rating and reviewing and all that. And I was like, why is that a big deal? And I get it, because it does give us greater visibility in the world of podcasts, where there are a lot of great podcasts to choose from. So just like feeling really loved and supported and encouraged by those folks who have taken that time to do that. It just, I don't know. I feel the community and I feel the love like across the distance. So shout out to all of you who've taken the time to do that. Thanks a lot. Yes. So, okay, with highs and hards under our belt, let's turn the corner into our episode. And, Ashley, when we had asked you to be on the podcast, we knew like anything Ashley wants to talk about, we'll take it, because you are so wise and reflective and prayerful. And the thing that rose to the top for you was being able to offer your perspective as at this moment, a single Catholic woman, and how that connects to your experiences in ministry. So maybe we can start with a little background about who you are and what drew you into parish ministry initially. Would you mind sharing about that?
Sure. Yeah. So long story short, I grew up in a Christian home that was kind of Catholic on the side. We belonged to this like ecumenical, charismatic community, Catholic on the side. And as I neared the end of my high school years, I found myself, first of all, I encountered theology of the body, which is something by John Paul II, very Catholic. And I was captivated. But at the same time, I was engaged in another denomination and their youth group. And so I found myself just in this place of like, oh, I love Jesus and I want to serve him. And I want to help other people serve him, but I don't quite know, where I belong in that. And so I kind of took a leap of faith in a weird way. And I decided, you know what, I'm going to go to a Catholic university, because I figured if I decided to be Protestant, for some reason in my brain, I thought that like they'd forgive me for having a Catholic degree, but I thought Catholics were quite strict. And I was like, they'd probably be less forgiving if I had like a Protestant theology degree. Whatever. It doesn't even matter what the logic is. But the point is that I ended up at a Catholic university where even if it wasn't necessarily that the theology was incredibly sound, but the people surrounding me were really sound. And I encountered a priest there who just set my heart on fire for the truths of our faith, who, clarified the classic things that I think a lot of people might get hung up on, around Mary, around the Eucharist, around the priesthood, different things like that he had compelling answers for. And his preaching was dynamic. And I kind of caught the fire for Catholicism at that point and started heading down the path of really bringing that desire for ministry into the Catholic realm, right? Into really being a Catholic minister. So ended up finishing my degree with a little detour to serve with Net Ministries in the middle, which further grew my desire to work with young people. And then after that, I taught religion for a couple of years and got to be in the lives of teens in their everyday, like I call it like their natural habitat, and loved that. I loved that because I got to just see them frankly at their worst at times and just, so I loved that. And then finally made my way into the parish, really desiring to have more of an opportunity to do evangelization. Because where I was at, I felt like I was being asked to like teach these deep truths of the faith in the school setting with no previous encounter with Jesus. And so that ultimately led me to be like, I got my degree in youth ministry and let's do it. So I ended up working as a youth minister then for a few years after that.
So really like wanting to go after their hearts and like to facilitate that relationship with Jesus, like in their hearts. And I mean, it sounds like you wanted them to have a piece of what you had, through that priest who it's just so, as I listen to him, like, oh, isn't it amazing how one person can just rock someone's world in a great way. And here you are, affecting the lives of so many individuals and families. And I love that. Okay. So from school to teaching to parish youth ministry, and then somewhere along there you discerned to go back to school.
Let's again change the career again. So here's what happened. A variety of things happened, but one major piece was that I noticed a commonality in myself and in my giftings as a teacher and as a youth minister. And it was sitting one-on-one with my teens or with their parents and just listening to their stories and helping them problem solve whatever issue was before them. That's when I came alive. That's when I just felt like, oh, this is what I'm here for, and all the other aspects of teaching and youth ministry were just fine. But they weren't the light that I felt when I was sitting with people. And so amidst that and amidst seeing just the growing mental health challenges, among the young people that I was serving and their families, I decided to take the leap in none other than 2020, as one does.
Wow.
But, I should say this too. I originally had double majored in psychology and then ended up minoring, but it had always been in the back of my head. Like I'd always been interested in psychology. And I had kind of made the joke of like, I could never sit and listen to people's problems all day. I'll never do that. And then just as I grew and learned more about myself and walked with more people and learned and like understood myself better, my own journey better, I was like, actually, like, I kind of do want to do that. I kind of do want to sit with people in their ache, in their hard. And I eventually just decided to make that shift, and I'm in year 3 of school and I'm ready to hit the ground running here. So.
Oh, beautiful. I love it. And it sounds like gifts well discerned and putting them before the Lord, like, okay, God, where do you want me to be? Where do you need me to be to serve your people best? I love that. And I'm so grateful that we get to benefit from your experiences here on this podcast, but just in the church and in this field at large. So thank you.
Oh my goodness. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So we've got you in the hot seat, Ashley, and you are being incredibly generous to us in sharing about the single life. And as a non-single person, I'm curious, like, what are some of the comments? What are some of the things that people say to you about being a single person, especially a Catholic single person?
Yes. So many well-intentioned people, but so many unhelpful things. I think, one of them is like, oh, it'll happen when you least expect it.
Oh,
like, oh, really? Because I haven't been expecting it for like, a solid few years. Right. That's one of them for sure. Another one is, well, you're single. You have all the time in the world.
Ooh.
Oh, okay. Got it. I've also had people say, well, maybe God is having you get married later in life because he knows that your marriage is going to be full of suffering and he's trying to like spare you the years of suffering.
Oh, wow. That's complex.
Yeah. Kind of like the look on the bright side, or like, hey, at least you, like, fill in the blank, get to sleep through the night, or like, at least you get to make all your own decisions. And don't get me wrong, like there are some nice pieces about that, but sometimes I kind of wish I had to have somebody help me make decisions.
I'm not made to be in isolation or
exactly,
to be
exactly. Have you tried therapy?
Like funny
What's
story.
wrong with you? Yeah, exactly. Maybe you're called to religious life, which again, valid. But like, what if you've already discerned that like a couple times and like the door has been slammed shut, you know? Like,
yeah.
Or I've heard maybe God just wants you to fulfill X before he brings your husband, as if like I have to earn it.
Oh, so yeah, so you can tell like well-intentioned,
Very
and
well-intentioned.
also like, wow, you really are not letting yourself enter into like my pain. Like
exactly.
The lack of empathy is
Exactly.
pretty evident. Yeah. So I feel grateful to you for a lot of things, but one thing in particular is your willingness to be with us today to talk about something that I feel like can be really taboo in our church, and can be really difficult. And I'll be perfectly honest that as, someone who is married, got married at the quote culturally expected time in my life, my mid-20s, and I have children, this is something that it's hard for me to know how to speak to my brothers and sisters in the faith when they are single, beyond the quote expected time, or that they've acknowledged that this is not a comfortable or desired place for them to be. And so I really feel thankful. Like I don't know what you're going to say yet today, but I just already feel really privileged that you would let us into your experience and to let us learn from you and your own reflections. So, maybe Ashley, we could just start with that very fact that, you are single, and maybe, sharing what that has been like for you, and getting to be honest with us about the humanity, the human experience, of this single life that you're living.
Yeah. Thank you. Actually, I would like to return the thanks because I think the single life can feel unseen and lonely. You go to parishes and we hear prayers for the priests and for the religious and for married couples. And, oh, wait, what about us? Just a lot of the different events at parishes can be for moms groups or youth groups or kids, right? It can feel really lonely. And so just having a space to share that is really an honor. So thank you for making that space. My experience being single, I will say that it's been a journey, and it's a journey that I'm not on here to talk about, the misery and like poor me. Like, no, I mean, it's painful, but it's also like genuinely been beautiful, and it has genuinely brought me into such an intimate place in the Father's heart. And so I guess just overall, like, I would say that as a single person, I've gone through many phases, right? Kind of the angry phase of, okay, Lord, like I remember thinking there's round 1. Okay, I missed that. No, right after college, round 2, 25. Okay, round 3. Okay, round 4. Like, right. Like I kind of just like watching these different friends just get married and very quickly becoming outnumbered. And watching them have their children and wanting so desperately to be happy and to rejoice in that, and yet finding it sometimes like unbearable, just like being at the vows of friends and just kind of choking back some tears. And I think that at first it was in an angry way, right? In a, Lord, what am I doing wrong? I've done therapy. Like I've done spiritual direction. Like I'm a freaking youth minister. Like, what do you want from me? Like, right. And, but, I think inevitably, like it went through like, God, what's wrong with you? And then God, what's wrong with me? Like, right. Just what is it about me? And I think that, one piece that was helpful is just finding other single women. And there are a lot. Like, I'm sure there are single men, and I don't want to not speak to that, but I can't really speak to the single man life, just to be honest. I'm sure there's some overlaps, but But there's a lot of single women, and I think starting to recognize that was helpful at first for me to think, oh, I'm not alone there. But yeah, just as I learned to lean into that ache, and be honest about it and ask those questions and cry and just beg the Lord and, just over and over again, just dialoguing with him about it. He's helped my heart to see many things, which we can maybe get into, but certainly seeing his presence in this intimate place of my heart, like he has met me in a place that I don't know any other thing in my life maybe would have brought me there. That's a little bit of a teaser, I guess. But, and then also helping me see that my ache of singleness, yes, is unique, but actually every single person has an ache. They have an area where they wonder if God's going to show up, or a prayer that seems unanswered.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm hearing that, and I am, again, just in awe of your vulnerability in being able to share with us. I want to go back to something that you were acknowledging. You're talking about the anger and kind of the anger outward toward the Lord, and then the anger inward towards myself, like being self-critical. And it was really reminiscent to me of like the stages of grief, right? Like the classic, like, there's denial, and then there's anger, and then there's bargaining, and then there's, and then we end up with acceptance. And I was thinking about the idea of ambiguous loss. And so, in school, it's something we learn with like trauma and grief processing with our clients. The concept of ambiguous loss, that in our culture, there are certain losses, like the death of a grown-up, that our culture like knows what to do. We have the funeral, we bring the casserole, we send the flowers. Like, there are rituals and there are expectations around it. And so as I was listening to, I was thinking about, when you were naming, the prayers that we hear at Mass, and like there aren't any prayers for the vocations of those who are single, and just there's this ambiguity and real loss within that. And maybe if you could just say a little bit about what it's like to have a loss that our culture doesn't really acknowledge like widely. This expectation that like, well, you're single in transition to something else, but that's not a guarantee. You don't know where that's going. So there's ambiguity.
Yes. I feel so seen. That was beautiful, because I think there is a grief, that ambiguous loss of, I mean, so many moments of like, I thought I would have had 4 kids by now, or what, just these different moments of grieving the life that you kind of thought you would have had. Right. Yeah. And the church is really great at offering, the singles groups when you're young, right out of college. And then it kind of like jumps to like the married with kids. And when you're single a little longer, or maybe a lot longer, depending on who you are, than is quote unquote average, it does feel kind of like homeless within the church, right? It can feel kind of like, don't get me wrong, theologically, I know there's a place, right? Like, in Jesus's eyes, I know there's a place. But I think in act, this is kind of a new phenomenon for the church, right? And like, we haven't had these men and women single into their 30s and 40s as much as I think we are now, right?
Yeah.
And so I think what's interesting is like in the church culture, I can feel kind of out there, or like, I don't really know, like, is it weird that I'm here and I'm the only non-mom? Like, but then it's also weird because in like the secular world, people are like, you go feminist, like you just get that career and like, you just kind of keep doing you. And so it's kind of this weird, like,
but no, that's not what I was thinking.
Right? Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of this weird place of like, so like in the culture, I kind of fit in a way that I don't want to, but like in the church, I don't really fit in.
Yeah. I mean, when you use the word homeless, like, where is my place? Where am I seen? Where do I belong? Where are my gifts celebrated? Where am I understood? Yeah. And I think about the other the other groups or the other persons who may also say, I don't know if I have a place here. Again, like theologically, yes, there are these truths, but then in act and in actuality, how does my church welcome me? Do they make space for me? Do they go into these maybe unknown or uncomfortable spaces and places to welcome me in and to like hold me close? So, I mean, I don't know. I love that you are able to use your experience to connect, and maybe you can say a bit more about what that's been like for you.
Yeah. I love that you said that too. I keep saying that, but we're on the same page here. I have thought about myself as a single woman, knowing that I still have the potential within our theology to like have that capital V vocation, right, of marriage. And yet I've come across, a lot of people that have same-sex attractions. And I think about how in the eyes of the church, right, in terms of marriage, like that's not ever going to be a possibility. And so where do they fit? Where are we making space for them in the long term? That's one group that my heart has been really drawn toward. Also, I've walked with a dear friend through an experience of infertility and just the ache of, oh my gosh, like this person just had their fourth kid and I am just wanting one, and so there's that ache and where do we belong in the church? Because we don't have that quote big Catholic family that we're supposed to have, or or the person whose child has a severe mental health struggle and they just feel like nobody understands. There's just, you could go on and on and on. And I think, another group is those who have been divorced or those who are widowed. Just that place of not necessarily knowing exactly where they fit as they're listening to the homilies, as they're listening to the prayers, as they're looking at the bulletin for like what thing to get involved in without feeling like they're standing out like a sore thumb. And so absolutely I think that has actually been though what has helped my singleness not just narrow in on myself, because it's helped me to be like, oh, like I'm not so special and so alone in my ache and in my feelings of being a quote unquote outsider. Like there's a lot of us, and what a gift that I have eyes to see groups of people that I maybe wouldn't have seen if I didn't feel myself or feel, like an outcast myself at times.
Yeah. And I mean, really, it's a testament to your openness to the grace of the faith, to let your pain, if I can call it that,
yes, you can.
and to let your pain become an avenue to connect with others. I can't think of anything more Christ-like. I mean, he came to enter into our suffering, and to unite us in suffering. And one of the things you kind of referenced here and there is this universal ache, and that word universal, really captures me. It's Catholic. I mean, literally, you know what the word Catholic means. And so can you talk about that? I love your understanding of this. And I think this could be really spiritually formative for me and for our listeners.
Sure. Yeah. So I have gotten to know the single life a little better than I had ever anticipated or hoped for, frankly. And
that was an amazing reframe right there, folks.
Hey, it's therapy. You do it on yourself, guys. But truly, like I've learned so much about myself and about God and about where I doubt and where I don't trust him in my singleness. And I think, my journey in singleness of having this ache that I'm like, Lord, I want to be married, right? What do I have to do? Just going through those different questions. I saw the Lord turn my heart from self-pity to being able to sit with that, see his goodness, and then learn how to sit with other people in their unique aches. I think my singleness has helped me realize that I'm not made for this earth. And I think when my biggest dream that I had not yet fulfilled was being married and having a family, and recognizing like, wait, what if that doesn't happen? Like, is that what God promises? I mean, not explicitly, right? Just kind of coming to terms with that, I think opened my eyes to, well, what does he promise? Right? Like, what is the promise of God? And I do think that he desires to bless us with good things on this side of eternity. But I also think that it's in our longings, in the not yets, in the unanswered prayers, that we are invited to look into heaven. And I think that my longing for marriage has become that gateway into heaven, to go, okay, now with an eternal perspective, I am still his loved one. He still has good plans for me. He actually has offered me the same salvation that he's offered all of my married friends, you know, and he desires my goodness just as much as he does for them. And so I think that, for me, that ache has become a blessing, because it's helped me to just really have to grow in intimacy with the Lord. And I also want to acknowledge the fact that I think if I had heard myself say that 5 years ago, I probably would have rolled my eyes. You know what I mean? Like, kind of like, okay, girl, like, stop talking about this. It sucks right now. You know what I mean? And and I want to acknowledge that with whether it's that you're single or whether it's some other ache in your life that you're just not quite in a place where you're able to go, this is so beautiful. Like, I get that. And I've been there, and I still have my moments like that. And yet I do find that the more we can acknowledge that, like, Jesus did tell us that we're going to have crosses. Like, he did not, he's not lying to us by allowing these things. He's being true. And if we can learn how to just, sometimes I even just imagine myself just like hugging that cross, like just laying and just like my weight falling on it, and just, you know, in that resignation almost, there's a deep intimacy there. And kind of circling back to the universal, as I speak with people with different aches, their experiences are so similar. Like, we want to reverence the uniqueness. Like, experiencing infertility is not the same as experiencing singleness. And I never want to equate them or any other longing. And yet they both can become avenues to looking into heaven and to having to fall upon the cross in a way that maybe nothing else causes us to do.
Yeah. Well, I think about, you know, as Christians, we often talk about like already, but not yet. Like, you know, the kingdom has come, it's already reigning, but not yet fulfilled, like not yet in its totality. And so, you know, we can have these human joys on earth. We can have that consolation of like, okay, I know the Lord loves me. I know he wills good things for me. I know that his love is a perfect love that's, you know, wiser and all knowing than anything I could dream up for myself. And also, heaven isn't fulfilled. Like it isn't, I'm not yet fully satisfied. And so I thirst or I ache. And I think about, certainly St. Augustine's, our hearts are restless until they rest in thee. And in this, I don't know, maybe this sounds odd, Ashley, and, you know, feel free to be like, Kenna, you can't say that as someone who isn't walking this road of singleness. But, you know, you are confronted with that ache, I imagine, on a daily basis in a very like real, concrete way. And for those of us who maybe don't have it in such a clear, concrete absence, you know, in our life, it takes a bit more, I I don't know, surrender to notice our ache. You mentioned it was universal, and I agree with you. But I will say that I think when, we live in this world of great comfort and convenience and, all the technologies, and by that, I don't just mean electronics, but I mean like all the things that make the easy buttons of my life. I had a friend once who said to me, like, kind of like, you've got what all of us, she was a single woman, like, you've got what all of us want. And it took me aback, and it made me realize that in order to connect with my suffering God, I have to be more thoughtful and reflective, because in the day to day, I am well taken care of. I've got a roof over my head. I've got food in the fridge. I've got, a husband next to me and children to send off to school. Like, in a lot of ways, I'm, quote, like, living the dream. Yeah. And also, like, the Lord wants me to desire him. Like, he wants me to leave that space for only him to fill. Yeah. And so I'm just, I'm thinking about how much more intentional maybe I need to be, and maybe other listeners need to be, in order to uncover this, because it may come off at first as like, ache, what ache? No universality there. Like, I've got it. I've got what I need. Yeah. I'm self-sufficient. Like, my life is rolling. I think what's maybe even trickier is identifying it when we, quote, like, have it all together, right? Like, so not only do we know exactly what parish group we belong to and what, events in the bulletin we can attend, but we have a prominent role of leadership, and people look, to us and at us as if we've got it all going on, and how could we long for anything? But, what you've shared so far leads me to believe, Ashley, in your experience of ministry and now as a counselor, that you see this is universal. Absolutely. So what are some of the other iterations that you come across? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, I think I immediately think of people who are dealing with everyday just anxiety and depression, and it's just kind of hidden. But they're showing up with that, and they kind of can hide it, or they can kind of blend in a little bit. And yet it's so deep for them. Or I think of people that maybe they have just different dynamics at home that are dysfunctional, but they're hidden. Again, people don't necessarily see that. Or maybe even just the financial burdens of, I wish we had X, Y, or Z so that we could kind of do the same things as these people that we love, right? Just kind of feeling a little bit out of the loop for that. And I think I also hear people that, like you said, kind of, quote unquote, have it all, and yet they're still feeling unsettled. Like, there's still this question of, like, what is this for? Or, like, what is the purpose of all of this? And I think that is a great indication of that longing of, even when we, quote unquote, have it all, our hearts are restless. They are oriented towards heaven. And so no matter what,
we're not fulfilled here. Yeah. I mean, especially that last example that you give, like, that is very, very common in my office, that people come in and say, like, there must be something wrong with me because I have it all, and yet I feel sad, or I feel anxious and worried. And it's such a gift. My role as therapist, it's such a gift to be able to help them put words to this. And again, I get to be in that privileged place of, like, integrating faith into the work. And so we get to talk about it. All of that is very pertinent, I think, for all of us walking around this earth right now. Yeah. We've kind of spoken up here in a more theoretical, abstract way. And I'm curious if you have, like, concrete practices or, counsel to offer to those who may be listening right now, or those of us who are going to take this advice and be open to experiencing our ache. Like, what do we do when we find it? What do we do when we're in it? How do you survive that?
Yeah, I have a few thoughts on that. So first of all, I think one thing that has been helpful for me is to just allow Jesus to meet me in the ache, which that might sound really funny. But one way that I have experienced this, and maybe that'll help make it a little more practical, is when I've come across Jesus's words from the cross, I thirst, I have been able to sit and think, oh my gosh, like you're admitting longing, like you're admitting that your heart is not yet satisfied. You thirst, right? And I've heard Mother Teresa talk about this, right?
It's
and
like
just,
in all of her chapels, right? I thirst.
Yeah.
Yes.
And like he thirsts for me, he thirsts for you, he thirsts for the love of the church. And so I think when I come across that passage in those words of Christ, it's a moment for me to recognize my thirst, my longing, and to let Jesus see me in that. Like, oh, you get it. Oh, you long. Like, if I am longing for this, how much more are you longing for me? So that's one like practical type of prayer that I have found to be helpful. I think another really key piece for me has been learning how to live in the both and. So I used to think, for example, from the single perspective of like, either I need to be all in hoping that I'm going to get married and like despairing that I'm not, or I need to just give up the idea altogether, protect myself, right? Just kind of these different extremes. And I think there's like a little phrase that God put on my heart a few years ago called contentedly longing. Like, how do I allow myself to simultaneously be content with the great, amazing gifts that God has given me right now, and the people and the opportunities and just so many gifts that are right now, that contentment, that kind of that already that you were speaking of earlier, while at the same time holding that not yet, right? Of like, oh, and it hurts, and like changing the language from but to and. Like, I love my life right now, and it hurts that I'm not married, and just, it's a subtle distinction, but I find it to be really freeing.
It's a game changer.
It's a game changer.
Huge.
And I think that's really relatable for no matter what you're going through,
absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
To just learn how to accept that dual reality, and there's a lot of freedom there. And even concretely, as you're diving into the both and, I have found it helpful to just journal about that, just to journal the honest feelings that I'm having while also journaling the objective promises of Jesus. And sometimes I need friends to tell me those promises, but to then just allow myself to hold those together and to give myself permission to feel both. And I have found that as I'm able to do that, I am more equipped to then do that for others. And so I think that's kind of my third piece of the more comfortable we become sitting in that tension in our own lives, in that both and, that discomfort and that comfort, and like that, wow, this is great and this is really hard. Just the more that I think we enter into that, I guess, the ache, I think it widens our capacity to do that for others.
Yeah.
And I have lived experience of that. I have a dear friend who I've seen this reality come true with, where in her own unique ache, which is an infertility, she has a greater capacity to sit with me in my ache of singleness. And I've seen my ability to sit with her in her infertility while still acknowledging the differences.
Yeah.
And I think that the more comfortable that we all become allowing that tension to exist opens up the opportunity for us to be that for others. Yeah. And really kind of circling back to that loneliness that singles can feel, or that people who have been divorced can feel, et cetera, et cetera. If someone is sitting with me in my both and, even if they're married with 15 children, like I feel seen and I feel loved and I feel like a part of the community, when it's not just, hey, will you babysit my kids? Or, oh, you have more time as a single person. Can you just do that? Like, when it's not just that, but it's a true entering into my story, like truly those barriers, for me at least, have been overcome.
Yeah.
And so I think that would be my other practical piece would be to like learn how to sit with other people in their aches and not try to solve it, but to just be in it and to just allow Christ to unite us and not our states in life.
Yeah. I mean, I'm really, when I think about it from a psychodynamic perspective, through my therapist lens, the concept of self-compassion, and then empathy, like those two concepts show up. And so I hear you saying, can I develop the capacity for self-compassion for when that feeling shows up in me, when the ache makes itself known, instead of dismissing it or instead of indulging it and letting it overtake me and rule my life and, take the steering wheel from me, instead to acknowledge it, to validate it, and to say, yes, and there are other pieces to this story. And when I can do that in that self-compassion, I can in turn be empathetic to others. I'm not threatened by or overwhelmed or overtaken by their upset feelings. I can be with them without being worried that I'm going to be engulfed, by their pain. I mean, that's often what causes us to put up these walls.
Absolutely.
Is like, that's too much. That's too big. That's too awkward. That's too taboo.
I don't know the answer.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. I don't know. Yeah,
I can't solve that. So go away.
Exactly. I'd have to just sit with you, and you might leave feeling as bad as you did when you came.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, welcome to therapy sometimes, guys. Bummer news. But when we can do that for ourselves, we feel greater confidence and trust that we can sit with the discomfort with others.
Yes,
so
exactly.
Exactly. Beautiful. So I am just, I don't know. There's so many other places I could go with you right now, Ashley. So let's just say this is like, we're going to put a pause on this, and be able to come back and have you on again.
Oh, awesome.
And talk about a few things. I've got some notes here, of future topics in mind that you briefly touched on. But I think we could all benefit from hearing more from you and from the way that the Lord is really using you to bring truth and healing to his people. Thank you. Thank you for sharing so vulnerably about, again, your own story and your reflections. Before we go, actually,
sure.
You may again be aware that we have another custom here on This Whole Life, which is sharing a challenge by choice. And so we gave you the option to come up with one. Do you have something for us?
I do.
Okay.
I do.
What you got?
Yeah. So kind of along the lines of this universal ache, and whether maybe some of you have been listening and you're like, I know that ache. And maybe some of you, like Kenna mentioned, are like, I mean, I don't even really know. My life's pretty good. Regardless, I just invite everyone, challenge by choice here, to just take a few moments this week and invite the Holy Spirit to highlight a particular ache in your heart. And as that becomes clear to you, I just invite you to take a nice pause and just sit with that for a moment. Maybe even take a nice deep breath and just recognize it. What are you feeling? What are your thoughts around it? What are you thinking about God in this ache? Just kind of sit with that. And then as you're sitting with that, to just pray the litany of trust, just as a way of saying, Lord, this is the ache, and I maybe don't understand it, and I don't like it, or, whatever that might be. And I trust you, and I'm inviting you into this.
There's that both and.
The both and. I'm all about it. So that would be my challenge by choice this week.
Oh, all right. I am loving that challenge by choice. And I'm just particularly loving you're our first guest to come up with one for us. And so I am really looking forward to undertaking that with you, all of our awesome listeners. So Ashley, if you would join me in prayer to close today. And again, as you had told us to do, just taking a breath and really letting the Holy Spirit be present to us. Lord God, you who are divine wisdom and perfect timing, We pray that you would be with us, that in these moments of recognizing our ache, whatever particular form that takes, that you would give us the grace to pause, to be able to notice it and to recognize it as a hunger and a thirst for you, and in turn to receive your thirst for us. We give thanks for all of the blessings in our lives and ask you to give us the strength, the courage to be able to endure the sufferings, the real longings that we feel. And so we offer this prayer in your holy and perfect name. Amen.
Amen.
Well, thank you, Ashley, for being here.
Thank you. It's been a true pleasure, and I'm so honored to be your first guest, quite humbled. And honestly, this has been a beautiful, long-awaited opportunity to be able to talk about this. So thank you.
Love it. Well, we're excited that you get to share this message with all those of you awesome listeners out there. So speaking of you listeners out there, if you would please do us the honor of subscribing to this podcast so that you get the episodes as soon as they drop, sharing this with those who you think might benefit from hearing about the ache and all the other things we talk about here on This Whole Life. Rate us, review us if you think we deserve it. Give us those 2 thumbs up. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at This Whole Life Podcast, and on Twitter at This Whole Life. We want your feedback. We want to know your questions. What else do you want to hear Ashley talk about? Thoughts, reflections. Send us a note online by visiting thiswholelifepodcast.com. And until next time, God bless all of you. And here's to each of us uncovering that ache and that longing for you, Lord.
This Whole Life is a production of the Martin Center for Integration. Visit us online at thiswholelifepodcast.com.
I should have warned you that I don't need many prompts. I could just talk. So I am like,
I know someone like that.
Ashley, go.
It's like